Hi everyone, I'm Alexander and today we're going to be reviewing a video about the tech industry. This is a video by a very awesome YouTuber named Jen, and it's about the misinformation that AI is part of a bubble, kind of like in 2008. In reality, it's not, and he's made a lot of good points that get into the detail of what the problem is here and how this stuff is all going to turn out. There's a lot of stuff that he's missing though. Not that he forgot, but it takes a technical mind to actually figure this stuff out sometimes, and my background in tech has put me in a great position to tell you some additional details that even he doesn't know about how this stuff's working and what it all means for you. So, we're going to watch the video together, and I'm just going to kind of go through it here. I'm going to review it piece by piece, and we're going to stitch it all together, and hopefully we can have a really good conversation about all of this stuff here. So yeah, let's get started.
So by now, you've probably seen a dozen of these AI bubble videos.
How NVIDIA and OpenAI fuel the AI money machine.
I believe the AI industry is in a very big bubble.
We are in an AI bubble.
Is it a bubble?
But what they've all missed is what's truly behind it all. And I don't blame them, because the bubble is confusing as it is, and that's all by design. While this tech company funds this and then this one back around in a loop, Wall Street has been bankrolling the entire AI infrastructure boom using the very same tactics that crashed housing in 2008. Only this time, I don't think it's a bubble. It's far worse. It's a $1.8 trillion black hole where money goes in and it never comes back out.
AI is real, and it is going to change every industry.
The idea that chips and ontology is what you want to short is batshit crazy.
It's really not a good sign when you have a bigwig like Bezos having to convince people and explain, it's real guys, oh my goodness, you gotta believe me. Not that it's not real, but is it doing what we really want? Is it living up to any promises? No.
So to understand this whole thing, the best way is to build out the bubble in a way where it's actually simple. Because once you see the system, you'll begin to understand all the players that are involved that's out in the open and hidden, and why this is a black hole rather than a bubble. So let's break it down, starting with showing you the most important players that you need to know. First, the AI lab companies. You already know this, like OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, and Musk's xAI and Grok. Second, the chip makers that power AI, like NVIDIA and AMD. And third, data center providers like Oracle and CoreWeave that buy billions of dollars of these chips, store them in massive facilities, and then rent out that compute to the AI labs. And finally, these guys, which I'll reveal who a bit later on. But for now, remember those three to understand how the system is artificially propped up in a circular loop. And the loop begins with NVIDIA, the most valuable company in the world. And as you'll see, where all the loops lead back to. And recently, NVIDIA invests up to $100 billion in OpenAI. Sounds generous, right? Well, there's a catch. OpenAI must use that money to buy millions of NVIDIA chips, so NVIDIA gives OpenAI money to buy NVIDIA products. So essentially a discount disguised as an investment. But that doesn't matter on paper or to the public. As soon as a deal is announced, NVIDIA's revenue increases, stock goes up, and now they have even more money to invest back into OpenAI. And now the loop is in motion. OpenAI then signs a $300 billion deal with Oracle to build
This is an innovation on the original Ponzi scheme. As we all know, I'm sure, a Ponzi scheme is a simple trick of robbing Peter to pay Paul in perpetuity. When you look at this rotation here, this motion between OpenAI and NVIDIA, you're looking at an innovation on the classic Ponzi scheme. If we can just continue shuffling money around amongst ourselves, we don't have to share it with anybody else, and all the, the stock market and investors and the general public and Jim Cramer and everybody else can pretend like this is just some great and wonderful thing that matters, even when the reality is nothing's happening that concerns the public.
Massive data centers. And just like that, Oracle stock spikes 36% in one day. Oh, but I almost forgot to mention, OpenAI only makes $12 billion in revenue. So how the hell are they signing $300 billion deals? Well, that's the beautiful thing about this circle. Oracle takes that $300 billion and uses it to buy tens of billions in NVIDIA chips for their data centers, and NVIDIA now has more money to reinvest into an open AI. And just like that, the super loop restarts, but that's just the beginning.
It's a debt instrument. You don't have to have the money to say, hey, I owe you $300 billion. It's just a question for them to answer. Do I feel like you're going to be able to pay that back? That's where you can start going down the rabbit hole with a lot of this stuff and start trying to ask that kind of question that they apparently have an answer for. For whatever reason, Samsung and SK Hynix have reason to believe that OpenAI can come up with some $300 billion some way, somehow, that completely defies the logic of conventional business, supply and demand and account reserves and all this other, regular stuff that businesses have been doing for centuries. Apparently that doesn't matter. There's something here that's not being revealed.
Because in order to keep this going, you have to remove all the perceived risk. So remember CoreWeave? Well, they're a data center provider that needs chips to rent out to an AI lab like OpenAI. And so to make this happen, CoreWeave buys huge quantities of NVIDIA chips to install in their data centers, but with a trick. The deal NVIDIA generously gave to CoreWeave is that if they can't find enough customers, NVIDIA will buy any unused chips back risk-free. But hold on, there's more. When CoreWeave filed for IPO recently, it turns out that NVIDIA owned 5% of the company. And NVIDIA agreed to anchor the IPO with a $250 million order to boost up investor confidence. So you see the pattern here. Revenue gets recorded, stock prices go up, and rinse and repeat. So as I've laid that out, now it's very easy to blame these few companies. But the bubble didn't grow to this size on its own. The thing is, everyone is playing the same game, but in slightly different financial engineering strategies. Because NVIDIA isn't the only chip maker in town. And since AI labs like OpenAI require massive amounts of compute power, they're also buying billions in AMD chips. But in this deal, it's extremely unusual. AMD gives OpenAI the right to buy 10% of AMD stock for 1 cent each. 1 cent, but the stipulation is that the stock only vests if AMD's stock price rises after the partnership, which of course it does. Because the very second that OpenAI publicly announces this massive AMD deal, AMD's stock spikes. And today, AMD's stock price is actually higher than NVIDIA's. And this is exactly where our fourth and not so secret player comes in, big tech. Oh yeah, you really thought that they wouldn't be here? Amazon has invested $8 billion in Anthropic, the AI lab that makes Claude, and in return, Anthropic has to use AWS cloud and chips. Google does the same thing, but $3 billion into Anthropic, and don't think OpenAI isn't taking similar deals. Microsoft has already pumped $13 billion into them to keep them locked into their infrastructure. So what does this all create? It removes actual competition and replaces it with this multi-headed dependency where everybody's betting on everyone else in this small little circle.
This is called a cartel. And I have to correct him slightly here. They're not betting because there's no risk. Like he said, it's risk-free. I mean, hey, oh no, you didn't get enough customers? I'll buy your unused chips. We're all just in this together. This is a cartel. This is a cartel. They want to use their dominance collectively to exercise exclusivity over an otherwise open market. But as far as the market dynamic goes, I have to tell you this. The fundamentals of this as far as a market goes and like value and customer, do people want to buy this? Do they want to spend money on it? The fundamentals are dog rotten. And there's no fundamental value add in any of it. At the object level, this stuff is useless. And the reason that it's useless is because a lot of these people who are in this industry, a lot of the major stakeholders are useless people who never really deserved to get all of the wealth that they got. This is the original sin of the dot-com bubble. A bunch of people got made overnight multimillionaires and billionaires who did nothing of any kind of merit. There was no long road that they walked that culminated in their wealth. It's just like, oh, you made broadcast.com, here's your money. Oh, once upon a time you worked on Mosaic, here's your money. Oh, you worked on PayPal, X.com, here's your money. And the way that they see it is, if you're not smart enough to be getting on that boat, then screw you. You're just some kind of putz that likes to code for a living and we own you. That's how they think of this now. And this has been 25 years on from these mistakes. They've been repeated over and over again. And that's why they love to cite the dot-com bubble whenever they want to apologize and misdirect people about where this whole AI black hole is really going. They say, well, it's going to fail. Okay, why are you doing this then? Like, it doesn't pass basic logic smell test, Because they're being disingenuous. They know, the big money players in this stuff, they know that this is a scam. They know that this is not 2000. This is not the same as the dot-com bubble. You don't go 20 years on from getting rich from the dot-com bubble and have the exact same playbook. I mean, come on, There's plenty of guys that got rich off the dot-com bubble and have never been less relevant, like Kim.com, for example, just right off the top of my head. I mean, where's he at, He's certainly not in the same position as Mark Andreessen, but they came from the same cloth. So the game evolves. This is what it evolves into. Highly sophisticated financial engineering to cover up for the fact that they don't know what they're doing and they don't have the humility necessary to hire people and to cherish and benefit from managing and overseeing people who do. There's nowhere that this incompetence of theirs is more exposed than in the public meltdowns and embarrassments of Elon Musk, especially over the course of his acquisition of Twitter and eventual rebranding as X.com. It's the same thing with a lot of these tech stakeholders. They don't like computers, they like money, they like traveling. That's why most of their big obsessions have been stuff that's just technically not all that great and wonderful, or if it is, then that technicality is not the focus of any of their endeavors. Like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin's an ingenious invention, and to this day we still don't even know who really made it. But lots of people were intent on cloning it, duplicating it, pretending that they had some kind of secret sauce that they didn't actually, and they got shit rich off of it. That's been the game in tech. It's a bane of my existence, and they're not about to stop. They're going to keep doubling down, because what does a liar have to do? Keep lying, bigger lies. You need bigger lies to keep everything propped up. And at this point, they're telling us about zillions of dollars. They're talking about fundamental precepts of human civilization. Like, we're going to obviate the need for labor as we know it. That is their serious claim. There's no evidence for this. And everybody kind of can tell. Everybody can tell that they're lying. But we're letting them do it. That's the problem. That's the big reason why I'm running. Congress cannot sit by here and just say, sure, whatever you say. You can't tell the likes of Elon and Peter, you cannot do what we used to do in 2008 and be like, if you say so. Because if they say so, this is what we get. $500 billion in the public's name for just one of their big projects.
Now, xAI buys NVIDIA chips, but what you may not have heard about is that xAI absorbed Twitter, or X, earlier this year, so xAI can pull data from X to train Grok, its AI model. Tesla then uses Grok in its cars and robots, and Musk wants Tesla shareholders to fund xAI, creating a self-contained ecosystem where money, data, and compute all loop across Musk's assets.
This is what I was saying before about Elon. He's a window of unusually high legibility in how the mindset works with tech mobsters. Create a self-contained ecosystem where you own the whole show. You own the casino and everybody else is playing to lose, and you just get to get all their money. That's what it is. What Elon's doing there, everybody's doing. But you don't even know all the players. They've obfuscated it. Most of them are a little bit smarter than Elon when it comes to that.
And as I've mentioned throughout, the big bubble continues to grow at scale because the market rewards this sort of
behavior. The market does not. The stock market in particular does, but that's very arbitrary. And the reason that it does is a lot less to do with market fundamental dynamics and a lot more to do with how consolidated the stock market is in the hands of vanishingly few established players like Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, Blackstone, and so on. There's very few players, and they exert a lot of weight, and people don't talk enough about that.
Because remember how I said that all loops lead back to Nvidia? Well, all those stock jumps mean that Nvidia is now worth $5 trillion, or more than Japan and Germany's entire GDP.
This is your hint to call BS. Are they really worth more than Japan and Germany? Like, really? Like, let's just think about this like 5-year-olds, right? Like, I don't know anything. What do? They make chips? And just think of every German person in Germany. All of them. All of them. And their whole lives and everything that they're capable of. Because that's what GDP approximates, right? Gross domestic product. What is the sum total of what everybody in that country is capable of producing? They make chips. Are they really? Like, it just doesn't make sense. It's just nonsensical. They're just saying this because they can. Because they're enabled by the rest of the financial system to lie with money. Lie with money.
And if they want to keep that growing, they need to continue to convince the public that the demand will keep rising forever. Which means that they have every incentive to manufacture demand, not just meet it.
There is no demand, but there's a lot of financial instrumentation that has artificially created the appearance of demand. On the object level with the public, there's none. Nobody wants this stuff. They're trying to give it away to try to bait people into paying for it. No one's biting. It's really bad. But they don't care because they're planning not to lose anyways. They don't need you to subscribe to AI.
Because while everyone's been distracted by these headlines and stock prices, Wall Street has been quietly buying up the actual infrastructure that is needed for all this to function, from land, data centers, and power. And along with big tech, they're making the biggest bet in human history. And as you'll see, they're willing to pay any premium to make that happen. And the thing is, we've only seen the beginning. By 2030, $7 trillion is said to be spent on data center infrastructure. Since 2022, private equity firms have acquired over 450 data center companies. That's 80 to 90% of all mergers in the sector. And in 2024 alone, they announced $115 billion in deals, nearly double the prior 2 years combined. And what private equity is doing is that they're buying these buildings to lease them to big tech, and it's the perfect arrangement. Private equity builds a shell to collect rent payments, and big tech invests their money into faster and better AI tech while keeping the liability off their balance sheets.
Private equity is the language of this kind of crony capitalism that's undermining everything in our lives. Private equity is the language of consolidation. It's the language of subversion of governance, local, state, and federal. And it's the language of kleptocracy and plutocracy. Everywhere that you look in all industries, not just tech, private equity is coming to ruin everything. There's two forms of private equity. There's the kind that likes to pump and dump. So they'll go and do an acquisition. They'll fire everybody, cut the wages in half of the half that they don't fire, and then turn the product to crap and hope the consumer doesn't notice for 18 months and pocket the difference and then ditch. And then there's the long-term private equity. This is what BlackRock and Blackstone are. They're in it for the long haul, and that second type is what's mostly relevant here in the tech industry with the AI scam. They want to be here when it all falls down and own everything and hold it over everybody so that they can have the power.
But you might be thinking, why is no one talking about this? Well, simple. What do you think gets more clicks? ChatGPT passing the bar exam, or a company most people have never heard of like Blackstone acquiring multi-billion-dollar data centers?
He's being a little bit too generous. Don't forget, the stakeholders in all the major social media platforms are the same people behind this stuff, and they rigidly and ruthlessly control all of the recommendation algorithms that they've quietly forced onto everybody so that you don't see anything that really inconveniences them. This is why there was a big kerfuffle about TikTok during, the last few years. Why were they throwing a hissy fit that the public didn't really seem to have any genuine issue with? No one had an existential problem with TikTok, but they had to astroturf like this vaguely unspecified anti-China campaign. The reality is that the tech mafia is having TikTok as a thorn in their side because it's the only platform that they don't control. So it's not a coincidence here. If you look it up, Silver Lake, Andreessen Horowitz, Oracle. It's all the usual suspects, and now they own TikTok US and they got what they wanted. Capture, control, total information control. This is what it's about. This is hard politics, and this is what we're up against.
Okay, and now you might be thinking, well, so what? Well, because this is how the risks multiply. First, if this AI boom ends up cooling off and hyperscalers need less space, private equity is about to be stuck with empty warehouses full of unused or outdated servers. And if you've seen any of my private equity videos, these deals are usually funded with massive debt in a leveraged buyout. So now you can deduce that if they can't pay it back, these losses ripple through these banks and credit markets. But the second and bigger reason why you should care is because you're already paying for it. Because the infrastructure that private equity is buying isn't being built in Silicon Valley, it's happening in your neighborhood. Private equity-backed developers are buying up farmland and industrial parks in suburbs across America to build these massive data center campuses.
So they're close by. That's one way that we're paying for it indirectly. We're also directly paying for it with things like Trump's big beautiful check. Don't forget that. They're coming from all directions.
But I guess the good news is that people are fighting back. In Virginia, where a lot of these data centers are, a project with 84 data centers where one data server is the size of 2 Walmarts actually ended up being stalled, along with $46 billion in other developments. But this community backlash isn't just about land. And what all this investment from private equity fails to mention is that it's actually about power. And a perfect example was OpenAI's $500 billion Stargate project that will require 10 gigawatts, so power enough for 26 million homes or the entire state of Texas where I live in. And that's just one project. With the amount of investment into US data centers that are being built, it's estimated that combined, it will now draw as much power as 10 to 15 major cities, not to mention the millions of gallons of water a day.
This is where we have found our first red herring. You guys have probably heard this in a different kind of font before. One of the biggest misdirections and disinformation campaigns that's being waged by the tech mafia around the discussions being had about AI is of the environmental slant. They're saying, oh, this is taking up so much energy, this is so wasteful, it must be harmful to the environment, and they know full well that this is not going to have widespread popular sentiment behind it. It's a misdirection that causes their critics to self-discredit. Even Hank Green has been actually getting onto their case a little bit about this. He did enough research and he actually found out that AI data centers aren't even using that much water, which kind of just proves my point. This is planted. Here's how this is actually working. Their supposedly insatiable demand for power and electricity is a running excuse that funnels back in to the same motive that I've already mentioned. They want power. And when I say power, I don't mean it literally like he does. I mean political power. I mean hard power. They want this. And this is just another disingenuous expression. Here's our excuse. Oh, there's all this AI demand that doesn't exist. So, you need to give us all this electricity. You need to give us all this infrastructure. And of course, not coincidentally, it's all part of the plan. They're going to be first at the negotiating tables for all those major projects. They're going to be hounding the federal government to provide funding for all of this stuff with the running excuse that we just need it for AI, and this is totally like a market thing. This is not a giant conspiracy to hijack control of the United States government. They need it for AI that no one wants. No. And it doesn't matter how much power they get, they'll take as much as they can get. And at the end of the day, when they hit the stop button on this, which is also something we're going to get to with Gen here later, they're just going to own more. The more that you believe them and the more that you fall for this stuff, the more government contracts that you hand, the more infrastructure that you build for their demand that doesn't exist, the more that you partner and contract and make them stakeholders, the bigger that you make them, and that's the actual goal.
And the thing is, the US grid can't handle this. One nuclear plant is around 1 gigawatt of energy, and we built one in the US in the last 30 years. Renewable energy is currently limited by tariffs, and data centers take around 2 to 3 years to build, while power plants take 5 to 10. So what are these companies doing? Well, you really think that with all that money from big tech and private equity, they haven't found workarounds? Their solution has been installing gas turbines directly at these data centers, and they're strategically choosing states like Tennessee.
This is what I'm saying. They want people to be mad that we're burning fossil fuels for this so that they don't see the bigger issue that's much more existential and threatening. We want them to be mad about things that don't matter so that they don't notice the things that do. That's what's going on here. Don't forget it.
That lets them fast track environmental
And this
review,
is just stupidity.
all the while
It's
going
corrupt
against
politics.
their own green pledges that they made to show
it's a
how
lie.
much they care about the environment.
It's always been a lie.
So with all that said, I think that you and I can at least cut some slack if they're at least paying for the increased power usage. But lobbying is also in there. They're blocking laws that would make tech companies pay for the grid upgrades that they cause. So instead, regulation allows utility companies to spread the cost across everyone, meaning you could soon see an extra $10 to $20 on your monthly bill. And even if that sounds like peanuts,
Sure. But don't forget, this is not the biggest issue, not by a long shot. They want people to hyper-focus on this stuff and make them feel like, oh, your energy bill's going to go up. Well, let me tell you this. Your energy bills are not going to skyrocket by multiples, in all likelihood, just being realistic here. What's more likely to happen is you will see slight increases that get the, what do they call it? You know, the old Jon Stewart rally to restore hope and or fear, where he said,
the press can hold its magnifying glass up to our problems, bringing them into focus, illuminating issues heretofore unseen. Or they can use that magnifying glass to light ants on fire. If we amplify everything, we hear nothing.
point being, this is the flaming ant epidemic. Oh my God, my energy bill went up by 2%, 1.5. Look at this, and we're going to report on it endlessly. Never mind the fact that they're carving up millions and millions of acres that they have no intention of selling because, well, hey, who would they sell it to? But that's the point, is to own it all. Own the game so you don't have to play it anymore.
if 50% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, every dollar is going to count. Now look, most of you watching are Americans who care about a strong economy. So maybe I'm just being a devil's advocate here, but could this all be forgiven if private equity-backed data centers create tons of jobs, right? Well, during construction, it does. A new data center can employ over 1,000 workers for construction, but once it's built,
as somebody who's worked at a construction site, I can promise you all the jobs that a construction site creates are probably not ones that you want to be stuck in long term. So even then, when it's a lot of heads, not a lot of wealth for the American people. Not at all.
a typical data center actually only employs around 50 full-time workers. That's it. That's if the data center even ends up being used. Because the thing is, there are already signs that we're building far more than the market will ever need. Because remember CoreWeave, their entire business model depends on renting out chips to AI labs from their private equity financed data centers. But the thing is, chip rental prices are crashing. NVIDIA B200 chips went from $3.20 per hour per chip to now $2.80 per hour, which is below break even for many of these sort of operators. So that's sort of a red flag of oversupply, but it introduces the risk. Let's say if the demand that we're predicting never catches up, entire data centers could become stranded assets.
They will. They will. That's basically guaranteed. There's going to be a lot of dead real estate, and that's where the play has already been set. When that happens, they own it all.
And it's happened before, just like the 19th century railroad lines that lead to nowhere. And so if data centers become underutilized, the lenders who finance all this are going to take some massive losses. And with all these things connected, huge parts of the AI supply chains could become financially distressed.
The lenders is where you'll start to find the truth. The people backing this stuff. I highly recommend looking up Masayoshi Son. He's one of the more, relatively speaking, he's one of the more exposed operatives in this. What he's been doing with SoftBank for the last 30 years is making really big wagers to increase his rapport and credibility with the rest of the tech mafia in the United States by essentially borrowing massive amounts on margin from the Japanese economy and using it to help buttress and fund. He's providing liquidity to a lot of the tech mafia's operations, and he's been doing this for a long time. And in the old days, before they started inviting themselves into Washington and helping themselves to a bunch of congressional deficit spending, he was their main supply of liquidity that they desperately need in order to engineer all these Ponzi schemes and fraudulent businesses that don't do anything and don't go anywhere, but then conspicuously they never seem to go broke. These guys do not make bad bets and then wind up in the poorhouse. Doesn't happen. You don't see them. If they're in the poorhouse, they were never in the game anyways. And that's conspicuous.
But here's the thing. When the bet is as big as potentially replacing human labor, it's not going to be like other bubbles where if it pops, the market resets and life goes on. This bet is different. And so obviously I can't predict the future, but to show you why, let me walk you through the 3 scenarios of what will happen next to understand why this is a black hole. So since it's been a little bit too doomer, for your sake, let's start with the best case scenario. The hype actually catches up to reality and AI grows into its insane valuations and actually delivers on what the tech bros promise. And it's not that far-fetched. Think of like the dot-com bubble. Yes, a ton of companies went bankrupt.
No, and that's their lie. This is one of their famous lies. It's just like the dot-com bubble, guys. Come on now. We're going to lose. There's going to be winners and losers. No, there's not. They're all going to win out of this because they're planning on bankrupting it all. That's the plan. It's deliberate. They know that this stuff's not paid for. That's not the game. It's not AI. AI is the excuse.
And markets crashed. But from it came Amazon, Google, or even YouTube that you're using right now.
None of which are good actors these days. They don't have a good reputation. So if that's the upside, like, God help us. Oh man, what would I do without Google? It's not like there were tons of other search engines back in the day.
And the same could happen here, where from the fallout, we get real technological breakthroughs and AI really does become a force multiplier that democratizes opportunity instead of deepening it.
I hate Boston Dynamics. I really do. And it's just because of their videos. It's so stupid, man.
Inequality. Because what if the early research stays true, where AI tools have been found to help lower skilled workers earn more, work faster, and compete better? And although without a doubt, some jobs will be replaced, but also millions of people end up upgrading their careers. So that's the best case scenario, but you and I both know that every advancement comes with a price. And the real question is, what cost? Which brings us to the worst case scenario, the singularity. Not the sci-fi version where we upload our brains and transcend biology. I mean the real world version where government, big tech, and capital merge into one singular system of totalitarian control and where this guy is calling all the shots.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
Yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in
Should
this.
the human race survive?
Yeah.
That's it. There's your answer, guys. Reality is often stranger than fiction, and sometimes the big answer is hiding in plain sight. Or as I like to say these days, hiding in audacity. Daring to be noticed, daring to be pointed out.
Yeah, it sounds insane, but is it that far-fetched when it's already happened before? After what happened in 2001, the US quietly rolled out total information awareness, where it justified wiretapping, mass data collection, government agencies spying on citizens, all because of fear. So when the playbook is all the same, is it crazy that in the worst case scenario that this happens in the name of security? Again, I don't know, but hopefully we don't end up in this dystopian nightmare. So what is the most likely scenario? Because some creators say it's a bubble, others say it's not, or maybe a combination of both, but I really do think that they're all looking at it wrong. Because everything I've described so far isn't a bubble, it's more of a black hole. And there are 3 primary reasons why. The first is there's no exit. Big tech and Wall Street and the world at large are in an arms race to meet AI expectations. But AI infrastructure isn't capital that you can just pull back from. It's capital that gets sucked in the more you feed it. Every new chip requires more power, more servers, more cooling, more debt. And once the build out starts, the only direction is forward, even if demand never materializes. Not to
right.
mention, because so much of this is financed with private credit at double-digit interest rates, these companies can't slow
lose.
down. They have to expand,
can't
not
lose.
because demand is real, but because the debt also requires it. So this isn't like a normal bubble where you're buying assets hoping to flip them later. In this case, once a data center is built, who the hell are you going to sell a giant server farm to? Which leads to the second point, that there's no truth. These assets stay on the books at full value because they barely trade. And there's no price discovery until a bankruptcy forces a fire sale. So on paper, everything can look healthy even if the real value is collapsing underneath. And because most of this sits inside private equity, private credit, and corporate balance sheets, the public might not ever end up seeing what's actually happening.
The stock market in general has been losing a lot of its truth. Volatility has been steadily going up over the last few years. There's been a sea change in participation in the stock market. And now it's much, much easier to prop up these insanely unrealistic valuations that companies like Palantir, Broadcom, Nvidia, and Google that are worth all this money when in reality they're not.
Which leads me directly to the third and most important reason why this is a black hole. Because if it breaks, there will be no alarms. Traditional bubbles usually burst when sentiment flips and then everybody panics at once. But I don't see AI collapsing that way. As long as big tech keeps announcing breakthroughs and trillion-dollar deals, confidence is going to stay artificially high because that bet to replace human labor is a bet that we've never even seen before. And not to mention, with stock prices continuing to hit record highs, no one's pulling the plug anytime soon. But even if confidence really does slip to record lows, I don't think it will even be a sudden pop. It will be more so a slow bleed where server farm construction pauses. AI startups quietly start shutting down and utilization starts dropping. And again, because private credit is financing a lot of this, the public might not really notice for months. So to put it simply, this won't be like a Lehman Brothers moment like in 2008. It'll be more so like 1,000 micro failures all happening slowly behind closed doors.
All of this stuff is basically a giant accounting scam, and for what it's worth, I do think that his picture of a slow bleed is realistic. However, that's not going to be the story. I strongly suspect that they are going to have a fall guy, and we already know his name. It's the second Sam. The first Sam fall guy, of course, was Mr. Bankman with the crypto. This is the pattern. You're looking at 3 chapters, one that's already passed, one that's present, and one that's coming in the future. The first one was cryptocurrencies. This was the first big exit that all these major stakeholders and these techno-fascists took out and said, you know what, bump this. I don't want stocks anymore. I don't want the American dream. I'm not playing this game. I'm going to take my Bitcoin and run. And you know that there are important people and major players and stakeholders doing this because the government conspicuously just takes it seriously with no prompting or information whatsoever. It's like they know. That was the first one. It wasn't all going to go well. Sam Bankman, his biggest problem is that he could not shut up. He was tweeting, just brazenly, against the advice of his lawyers, against common sense and the general public, all the way to jail. And that's why they had to get rid of him, because they knew he was going to just continue to be a thorn in their side and continue to constitute depressurization gap in their containment vessel that they have here, their escape hatch. They have an escape pod, and he's hacking a big blaring hole in it. So they had to dump him, throw him overboard, so they can seal the exit back and get out with their money. With AI, it's the same thing. And this time, unlike with Sam Bankman, they planned this. They planned that Sam Altman is going to be their big fall guy, and it's very obvious. I think that Sam is probably smart enough to know, maybe on some subconscious level, just to be nice. He's got to know at some point here that he's sooner or later probably going to go to prison. I don't think that he's dumb enough that he has no idea. But he's the fall guy. And that goes into what I'm expecting to happen here that is dissonant with the reality. The reality is still going to transpire in this way of a slow bleed, inconspicuous shuttering, and nobody mentions it, they just continue to own all the stuff that they bought during this mania. They own all the land, they own all the warehouses and data centers, and what are they going to do with it? Who knows? But they can do whatever they want. They're not going to tell you that that's what's happening, though. They're going to invent a bubble as a media creation, and they're going to have a big circus show. with Sam Altman being perp walked to jail, and this is going to be their big comeuppance, and now everybody's learned their lesson. But don't notice how all the major stakeholders here are once again completely not to be found. Can't find them. Just like with cryptocurrency, where's Sam Trabucco? I don't know. I guess Sam Trabucco was smart enough to shut his mouth and know when to quit. He was CEO right up until 6 months before everything fell apart for FTX. Well, isn't that nice? I thought the icing on the top with Sam was him naming his yacht Soak My Deck. God, doesn't that just really kind of send it home? And no one cares. No one even investigated. No one even asked a question. Hey, does this guy know anything that we ought to be aware of? No one cared. Again, it's like Treasury buying Bitcoin. Everybody seems to understand what's really happening here, and they're not telling the public. They're like, no. Here. We're going to crucify this guy and tell you guys that we're so, this is totally a market. Meanwhile, your quality of living is completely obliterated. It continues to go south. There's no American dream. There's no financial stability. There's no option for you anymore. Where are the jobs? Where's the career? Everything is constricted. There's no fundamentals that's going to serve the public. There just isn't. It's gone. And this is the real object. This is your hint here that you're being lied to. This is a circus show, what they're about to do here, and popping the AI bubble. Even though on the market, on the object level here, on the facts on the ground, it's not going to be a bubble popping. There will not be a general sale. In 2008, there was a general sale. You and me, any Tom, Dick, and Harry could have bought a house, a distressed asset. There's not going to be a glut of distressed assets. There's going to be a bunch of companies screaming and crying and caterwauling about how they're just doing so bad, and all this captured media interests on social media are going to report on it with bated breath in order to create this impression that this industry is imploding. While all the hard assets, all the data center graphics cards and whatever else they have, all the buildings, all the plots of land, all this stuff, for the most part, it's going to stay on the balance sheet because they learned their lesson this time from cryptocurrencies. Don't use consumer stuff. Use the data center stuff, get the nice things, get the good shit, and that way you don't have any potential incidental exposure. It's not going to be like what happened with whenever China dumped crypto, and then all these graphics cards that previously no one could buy are selling for a bargain on eBay. So yeah, they're going to have a fake AI bubble popping, and it's going to be an absolute spectacle because that's the point. They don't want you to notice that the onward death march of consolidation is continuing to take everything from you and me, and Congress is complicit with this. And then the next thing they're going to do is they're going to have a media frenzy with quantum computing. The simple idea with quantum computing is a threat, just like it was with AI and people's jobs. Quantum computing is a threat to the public that they're going to hold over everybody's heads. Is they're going to say, we're going to be able to destroy all pretenses of your digital privacy by supposedly breaking everyone's passwords forever. And they want to turn it into another fake arms race, just like what they did with AI. We're going to go to the moon with all this stuff. It's just a running excuse to keep robbing and pillaging everybody else.
So that's the bottomless black hole, while also having every ingredient of a bubble. A world-changing story, concentrated debt, steady financing, and exposure spread across banks and private credit. But instead of popping, the capital just gets swallowed, disappearing into depreciation, energy bills, and endless debt payments. And so obviously no one knows what's actually going to happen, but what's clear is that the pace of change and investment into AI isn't slowing down, it's accelerating. Just as I was finishing this video, the White House signed an executive order called the Genesis Mission, which is essentially a federally funded push to win the race for AGI.
There is no race. This is the kayfabe. This is the fake story that they're selling everybody, that this is an arms race in order to strong arm and intimidate and coerce everybody into going along with their speculative scam. In the case of Donald Trump, he's a combination of ignorant as a baby boomer and also corrupt in the sense that he made his bed with the tech mafia when he ran for re-election in 2024. Elon Musk sat on Pennsylvania to help him win it, and this is the payback that they all get for that.
Or artificial general intelligence, and it's literally like the Manhattan Project of artificial intelligence.
This is an insult to American history. They are wiping their butts with our heritage when they talk like this. It's insulting. It makes me upset to even hear this kind of thing because it's so degrading. It makes a mockery of American history when they say this stuff. Total bullshit.
So the details are still coming out, but what this means is that the AI bubble or black hole isn't just powered by big tech and Wall Street anymore. It's now backed by the full weight of the US government as every country competes in this era's Cold War arms race. And again, it's this big bet that the world is competing on that makes it foolish to call this an AI bubble instead of what it is, a black hole. So whether you're for AI or against it, here's what you can do. Learn how power moves and don't be the guy in the comment refusing to embrace change. Because here's the thing, even if you can't change the system, the next best move is to learn to understand it. Because once you do, you can use that knowledge to protect yourself or even profit like Michael Berry did in 2008 when everybody else chose ignorance instead. Because in a world of money and power fueled by AI, ignorance is only going to be the most dangerous position of them all.
There you have it, I guess. Like I mentioned before, to be for or against, this is another misrepresentation and way in which we are having social media weaponized against us to gaslight everybody. Nobody in their right minds is against AI. That's just not a coherent position. That's not something that makes any sense. It's just, I mean, unless you're Amish or something, but that's just not, that's not, when people say that you're against AI, what they really mean is that you're critical of it, and they don't like that. So this is one of the ways in which our public discourses are undermined. There is merit in understanding how this stuff actually works, and that's exactly why there's so much obfuscation and just brazen disinformation on the internet about this stuff. The basic thing about it here, when you're talking about the types of AI that are most relevant in this Ponzi scheme, black hole, whatever you want to call it, they're all revolving around large language models. And if you're a smart cookie, you probably know there's another kind of AI here that's conspicuously absent from this whole criminal side of the conversation, and that would be the image generation AIs, like Midjourney. Fun fact, by the way, I was actually a conversation away from working at that, although at the time we didn't know, it wasn't a public operation yet, but back before I got blackballed from the tech industry, I used to be pretty friendly with a lot of important guys, including David Hulse. He wanted me to work as a lab assistant there at Midjourney when he was just starting it up. He had just sold his Leap Motion VR augmented reality startup. Good times. Good times. Nothing really worked out, but so you don't see so much in the image generation world getting roped into a lot of these scams, right? It's more, we talk about Anthropic, talk about Claude, Grok, and of course OpenAI. They're all chatbots. They're all this augmented everything kind of AI, and it's just, here's the basic facts. It's a stochastic parrot. That's the dreaded phrase, oh, that makes their ears bleed. They hate to say this, but it's true. That's the ultimate indictment against this large language model type of machine learning. It's really, really good at predicting what you're going to say next. It's not intelligence. It's fundamentally still dumber than a cockroach. That's why they've been trying to preempt and smother every narratives they want to talk about agentic AI, because it distracts and confabulates and confuses away from the basic fact that this thing has zero agency. None. And it doesn't even have the possibility of having agency. That's the first thing. So if you want to learn AI, fundamentally this stuff is really good at sifting through a bunch of noise that should probably be solved more efficiently and definitively with direct solutions of engineering anyways. This is a very inefficient way to solve the few problems that it does solve. These AIs and LLMs are very good at generating automated email responses that read like they were wrote by a human. Is that really how we want to be sending email? It begs the question. I don't know if I want to receive a bunch of BS emails from people who didn't care to actually write anything. I think at that point, I would feel more dignified if you just didn't send me an email. But that's just me, thinking about the fundamentals here of what we're really doing and how in the big picture we're still kind of wasting our time. It actually goes into a very common refrain that Slavoj Žižek makes about Well, he makes it as a dirty joke, and I don't know how much of that I could show here, but suffice to say, eventually the technology comes to a point where machines are doing all of the interesting parts of our activities here for us, and we're left with nothing to do. So if you want to be like Michael Burry, that's the first thing to know about all this stuff. It's a stochastic parrot. It's very good at predicting text. It's not a thinker. It's not a doer. And fundamentally, this stuff is really not any that different from an old thing that you might have heard of before if you're old enough. It was called Cleverbot. This is the same thing. They have taken Cleverbot and multiplied its inputs up by 9 or 10 orders of magnitude. But it's the same basic principle at work. I'm going to act like I'm intelligent, when in reality, I'm just guessing. Really good at guessing, but guessing nonetheless. Guessing based on things that a bunch of real human beings before them actually did the thinking to know and to figure out. And there's just no fundamental value add in that at the end of the day. That's not doing what people do. It's just getting a secondhand account for it. And that's useful, but that's not how they're selling this. I think it's a very good video here. Gen is really kind of getting a lot closer to the heart than some other reporters and YouTubers on this subject. But he's still missing the bigger picture here of how there's a lot of false avenues of criticism. There's a lot of red herrings. There's a lot of misdirections. The environmentalism or burning fossil fuels is one of them. The idea that they are even doing this for the AI is the biggest lie of them all. They don't care about this technology. Remember, these are people who got accidentally rich because we weren't being careful with our fiscal and economical policy in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. They don't love computers. They just happen to be here. It was a complete accident. It's like, Elon Musk. He's not a genius. He's just a nerd who got lucky. And they want to believe that they're anything but. They want to rig it all so that they don't have to take any chances, because in a fair fight, they lose. And they know it. In a fair fight, they lose. So would they need to corrupt everything, batten down all the hatches, consolidate, acquire everything that they can possibly get their hands on, to run away from the basic fact that they're not good for anything, that they're crappy, useless, undeserving people in denial, and they can't accept that, hey, I'm actually not good for anything, so I should learn how to do something. They're not going to do that. No, they're going to be like Elon, paying somebody to be good at gaming for them. That's how much they suck. And this is coloring everything that they really do. The AI is just a running excuse. It's a lie. It's a lie that they care about this. They know it's all a lie. This is just their latest and greatest running excuse to keep consolidating and acquiring and robbing everybody by lying to them in the grandest possible way. So yeah, that about does it for this video, I guess. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them. I try to read them. And yeah, I hope this video was educational and enlightening for you. I hope that you learned something from this. And I hope that if you're one of my potential constituents here in District 13 in North Carolina, that you'll strongly consider giving me your vote in the primary and again in November. My name is Alexander Nikolai. I approve this message, and I thank you all for your support and your time. Have a good day.